Hey guys, it's Karl. I just got back in from shooting my last kind of photos and kind of summing up my thoughts on the iPhone 13 versus last year's 12. So this video will kind of serve a couple purposes, both of course my review of the iPhone 13 and is it worth upgrading right now from last year's model, and I guess if you have any older iPhone. So I'll start off by saying, if you haven't seen them already, it has a very, very similar design. If you kind of glance at them, you might think they're almost identical. There's a couple telltale features, the first being the cameras. So on the 13, we now have that diagonal setup, whereas on the 12 from last year, we just had them stacked on top of each other. And if you just quickly kind of glance at the spec sheet, you might be a bit thrown off because they are technically both 12 megapixel sensors, but on the 13, we have completely redesigned glass. So you can see they are in fact larger, and that's because we're bringing in the sensor shift from the 12 Pro Max from last year, implementing that into the 13 line. That allows for better stabilization, better low light shots, and they've actually still redesigned the sensor to be better. Is there that much of a difference in the main normal camera in daytime shots? I would say they're pretty similar. I'll let you guys be the judge. In the ultra wide camera, that's where I noticed the biggest difference, especially in those low light shots. And I wouldn't say they're that much or significantly better, and that's kind of the overall theme with the 13 this year. It's just a slight upgrade from the 12. The next big thing coming to the cameras is cinematic mode, and for layman's term purposes, a lot of people will just think of that as portrait mode for the video side. It kind of does the same thing. It gives you that bokeh-like background, like you're shooting with a higher end DSLR or a cinematic camera. You can do cool things like rack focus. You can control that actually with your finger or let the iPhone decide which face to prioritize. And even though that is technically software based, that will only be available on the 13, and that does rely on that new A15 Bionic chip. So sadly, it's not just a simple software update that you can grab it on the 12. It's one of those flagship features that you can only get on the 13. It's pretty good. I wouldn't say I use it every single time. I think if you're already shooting video, it's awesome, but it doesn't give you those pro controls that perhaps a higher end content creator would want. It of course doesn't give you options to change ISO, change shutter, change aperture. There's sadly no pro mode for the camera, but they've also included something called Photographic Styles in the 13, which is almost like a filter, but they're kind of a tad bit different. They're actually baked in to the actual photo. So it's actually a new feature that you'd have to swipe across in the camera system. It's a new feature option that you can get to within the photo menu, and you've got 5 different photographic styles that you can choose from, and of course tweak to your own. You've got things like cool, warm, and vibrant, but just keep in mind it isn't a filter in the sense that you can change it post or after the fact. You can kind of apply them to a photo afterwards. They are kind of baked into the photo once you take them, and they really remind me of, say, a camera setting, say on my Sony. Each style kind of tweaks the color wave and say contrast ratio slightly. You just need to remember, if you prefer a specific style, it's almost like a set and forget. You'll kind of set that beforehand, and all the photos that you take afterwards will have that photographic style applied to it. Is that an absolute must-have? I wouldn't probably say so. You can always tweak your images in post in Lightroom. It gives you a very similar effect, but I guess it's nice that you can do all of those things kind of beforehand. So overall, I'd say the changes coming to the 13 are decent. They are minor. Maybe bigger ones have come to the 13 Pro. Still one of the best camera systems that you can get, and still class leading in terms of video. I would rank them kind of 1 to 2, and we'll have to see when the Pixel 6 drops very shortly. I know that will be this main competitor. That will probably compete for the best smartphone camera for 2021. The rest of the physical changes, once again, very minor. When you flip to the front, you can see the screens are near identical. There is a little telltale sign. The notch is 20% smaller. You don't really get any extra usable space. Apple hasn't really put anything interesting or useful into that extra space, and you can see it's actually slightly thicker as Apple has moved the microphone, or I guess the speaker grill, up top to kind of accommodate for that extra space. The 13 has become slightly thicker, and the volume rocker is actually moved slightly, so unfortunately you cannot use the same case if you are upgrading already from the 12, but this is actually the best feature coming to the 13. It's the battery. So that reason for that thickness, Apple has now included a thicker battery into the 13 Pro line, even the 13 mini. We're essentially just getting extra milliamps, and because iOS has become more efficient with its latest update, there are significant improvements to the battery, which I'm always a fan of. I'm happy to sacrifice extra millimeters to get longer battery life. So on the 13, I'm getting 5.5, 6 hours of screen on time. So that's around an hour and a half, sometimes even 2 hours more use compared to the 12. On the 13 Pro, my daily, which you see off to the side, I'm getting around 2.5, sometimes even 3 hours. And even by the end of the day, with heavy usage, I'm still around 20-ish to 15%. And I would argue if you use the phone lightly, you could survive 2 days on one charge. You'll really notice that difference if you're coming from an older device. The battery just seems to kind of last forever. That's a reason enough in its own to upgrade, because your smartphone is the device that you probably use the most out of any piece of tech. You obviously want that to last the longest. Lastly, to the displays, they still share the same size. They're still both stuck at 60 Hertz. If you want that 120 higher refresh rate, you'll have to go to the 13 Pro. The 13 is also 20% brighter, up to 800 nits. So I've noticed that difference when I'm outside, but kind of other than that, they still have the same glass, still have ceramic shield. And although that does help with accidental drops, as we've seen from the 12, it means that the glass is actually softer, so scratch is easier. So my recommendation, if you're still grabbing the 12 or even 13, absolutely grabbing a screen protector is a must. I've used these ones from Rhino Shield, and big shout outs to them for sponsoring this episode. It will keep your device protected if you're dropping close to $1,000 on a phone. The last thing that you want to do is scratch it right off the bat. They've also got a ton of different cases to choose from as well. My kind of go-to has just always been the clean and simple carbon fiber. You can see the simple carbon fiber weave, and you get all of the protection around the outsides, and of course that lip so your phone doesn't scratch when you do place it down. You kind of do miss out on the color option that you get, and I would still rank the blue as my favorite, maybe product red this year as my second. But the cool thing about Rhino Shield, on their site, you can actually customize their cases, and you can even change up simple things like the volume rockers to a color that you want. My girlfriend, who's actually grabbing the 12 Pro Max because it's now cheaper, I grabbed her a Messi case. It's her favorite player. I'm more of a Ronaldo fan, but that, I guess, is a separate debate. But they've got so many different options to choose from. And because I've just got so many cases from them, I'm, of course, hooking you guys up. I can't use these all, so I'll just pick a couple people from the comments. No matter what phone you have, I'm sure I can find one that suits your needs. So, yeah. Just be sure to sub to the channel, and of course, if you are interested to protect your new iPhone 13, that Rhino Shield link will be in the description. And to the rest of the phone, the next big change is just kind of coming internally to the chipset. So the 13 is rocking the A15 Bionic versus the A14. Most iPhones from the past 3 to 4 years are very quick, are very snappy. They're flagship devices, so no matter what you throw at them, they can obviously handle pretty easily. It's just those extra software features that Apple claims are kind of locked to the extra processing power of the A15. So like cinematic mode, that's why we technically can't have that on the older 12. And other than that, you just get a very solid iPhone experience, but you also get a very similar experience on the 12. So my recommended kind of option for you, if you are upgrading right now from an older model like say the 10 or 11, get a discounted 12 probably from your carrier. If you're someone that spends 7 to 8 hours on your phone a day and you're kind of eyeing that battery life, because I think that's the biggest upgrade coming to the 13. It just being slightly thicker to me is a big winner. I can still live without having cinematic video mode. I will admit the 13 has better low light photos. That ultra wide camera is better. I will argue though that most of the time people do end up shooting with just the regular wide lens. But yeah, that's kind of been my review for the iPhone 13. Not too much has changed, a very minor update, and already leaks and rumors are going off around how the iPhone 14 will be a brand new redesign. And that's typically how it goes. Every 2 years we do get a big design refresh. So I guess you'll have to stay posted till next September for that. Hope you guys enjoyed this vid, and of course all of the Apple coverage. Make sure you sub to the channel if you already haven't, and I'll catch the rest of you in one of my next vids. Peace!